our meeting here is twofold. First and foremost, the UN is celebrating its 75th year, and therefore we are, engaging with our stakeholders in different sectors just to understand how the UN has actually supported their sectors and how we can actually move forward together to deal with the issues that we are currently dealing with in terms of development and making sure that we achieve our Agenda 2030. The second part of this is now what has happened at the beginning of the year. And I will give you a few statistics. Eswatini has a Human Development Index of about 68.608. That's the index. But if you factor in inequality, it drops by 29% and it goes to 0.48. Now, inequality, it has been said, has a lot of reasons why it is happening. But as of the 2019 Human Development Report, there were two great factors that were highlighted as the ones that will impact on inequality. And if I may just track back a bit, education, for instance, is one of the key indicators for development. Now, two factors that will impact on inequality as of the 2019 report was climate change, and we know how climate change impacts and displaces communities. And the second issue is technology. What is quite amazing is the fact that in December, when the report came out, they were saying technology is seen as one of the factors that will be leading the issues of inequality. Come 2020, we see it happening already, even before we can take a breath. Already the COVID has actually shown us that without technology, it is almost impossible to actually go to school. It is almost impossible to learn. It is almost impossible to do quite a number of things which are really dependent now on technology. So the reason we are here as well today is to actually think about some of these factors that are happening as a result of the COVID, and to start determining or start talking or start discussing or start thinking about how we as players in this sector can actually support the country in terms of ensuring that we are able to forge ahead and not trace back or retract from the achievements that we have made in our development. So we are here to basically discuss about some of those factors. What has happened is that we are working with the University of Eswatini, for instance, as UNDP, through our Accelerator labs, to start looking at experiments on how we can actually innovate around technology to actually ensure that education is inclusive. I think the part here is that we have to have our education inclusive. So we have been working with the University of Eswatini to look into ways in which we can explore opportunities and explore innovative technologies and digital solutions that will ensure that we are able to advance education. Over and above that, we are also looking at how we can partner with different stakeholders in the different sectors to look at how best we can actually ensure that we are meeting the demands that are currently there around technology and innovation. With those remarks, I would just like to request at this point the Vice Chancellor, who is here, to make just a few remarks in terms of how the university is actually working to ensure that they are leading in terms of providing solutions, because we know we look to the university for solutions, for research, and we believe that the university can actually position itself to actually be a player in this field. In our midst, we also have the UN Resident Coordinator, Her Excellency Natalie Ndongose. She is actually the overseer of the whole UN system in the country. And she will also make her remarks around the UN75 dialogues as well. But at this point, I would like to request the Vice Chancellor of the University of Eswatini, Dr. Twala, to come and make his remarks. And after that, I will request Her Excellency Natalie Ndongose to also make her remarks, and then we shall start our discussions. Thank you very much.
Program Director, the UNDP Resident Coordinator, Dr. Dongose, the UNDP representatives, the Dean of the Faculty of Science and Engineering, Professor Mauta, the representatives and panelists from the Ministry of Education and Training, from UNESCO, from colleges, from Limpopo University, from Business Eswatini, from RSTP, the ICT Ministry, the UNDP Accelerator Laboratory, Mobile Network Providers, Innovation Association of Eswatini, staff and students, media houses represented here, Sanbonan Ninabeknen, which means good morning. Last but not least, of course, I would like to extend greetings to the virtual participants on the webinar, where there will be a discussion on the theme Innovative Digital Technologies to Propel Education. COVID-19 has come, and it is indeed an undeniable fact that the outbreak of COVID-19 pandemic took the world by surprise, and countries were not prepared to address the problems associated with the outbreak of such a pandemic. The disease is alleged to have started in Wuhan, China, and has spread like fire across 213 countries. To date, an estimated 16.3 million people have been diagnosed with COVID-19. 650,000 have died from it, and 9.43 million have fortunately recovered. In the Kingdom of Eswatini, 2,207 have been infected, 986 have indeed recovered. Apologies, this slide has moved. And unfortunately, 32 have died from the pandemic. We therefore take this opportunity to commend all those frontline workers, the funders, and everyone who has worked around the clock to help minimize the effects of the pandemic. The world, including Eswatini, has taken unprecedented measures to prevent the spread of the disease. And of course, following a directive from His Majesty's government, the country instituted several lockdowns, and the University of Eswatini closed on the 17th March 2020 in sync with government measures to prevent the spread of the disease. The university governing body, the Senate, consequently suspended all teaching and learning activities. The COVID-19 pandemic evidently caught us ill-prepared with respect to delivery of our academic programs. Although we had at the time already an active learning management system, which is known as Moodle, at the onset of COVID-19, only a third of our staff members had undergone basic training on blended learning, and of course on the use of Moodle. It was clear that we could not transition quickly to online mode of delivery for at least part of our programs as it happened in other universities. However, indeed it was heartening to note that some of our staff members were innovative and were already actively using the learning management system, Moodle, and other online platforms. Education systems around the world are facing an unprecedented challenge in the wake of massive school closures mandated as part of public health efforts to maintain and contain the spread of COVID-19. 68.5% of the world's student population is affected by school closures. 1.19 billion learners worldwide are out of school, and 153 countries are affected by school closures. Government agencies are working with international organizations, private sector partners, and civil society to deliver education remotely through a mix of technologies in order to ensure continuity of curriculum-based study and learning for all. These strategies are guided by a concern for equity and inclusion and the need to ensure the design and delivery of distance learning do not exacerbate existing educational and social inequalities. Beyond the response to the current crisis, the efforts to deploy distance learning at scale across all levels of education provides valuable lessons and will lay foundation for longer-term goals of building more open, inclusive, and flexible education systems after the COVID-19 pandemic has passed. The University of Eswatini was not spared from the effects of the pandemic. The university had to act quickly to adapt its teaching methods from face-to-face to online mode of delivery of instruction, which of course had its own challenges as our students didn't have the necessary gadgets and data bundles to access online teaching materials. 50% of the student population do not have the basic requirement for online learning, which is a laptop, and the majority of the students are underprivileged and cannot afford these gadgets. Program Director, in this regard, we extend our heartfelt gratitude to UNDP, who partnered with UNESCO through the Accelerator Lab to produce an application for digitizing learning materials for online learning purposes in the wake of COVID-19. A special appreciation also goes to the agency for supporting UNESWA's 7,839 students with 3 gigabytes data for accessing the MTN zero-rated UNESCO e-learning sites during the lockdown. It was a huge relief in that students are now able to access learning materials from the learning management system, and studying is continuing with minimal disruption. I would also like to congratulate the Faculty of Science and Engineering that has managed to get support from UNDP to develop an experiment on the digital learning platform, also funded through the Accelerator Lab. The experiment is aimed at exploring the use of app-based technologies for delivering content and supporting students in the learning process with the aim of increasing access and the reduction in the cost of tertiary education. Digital learning is now a mainstream in the education sector in general. Of course, the main aim of this project is to create a critical mass of skilled students that can help the university in digital revolution. It is hoped that these developments will assist the university to achieve its objectives of expanding access to a wider majority of students, not only within the country, but to the wider community of SADC. The university also hopes to adopt several learning technologies that are available within the digital space, which will allow students and lecturers to communicate remotely. These technologies include video conferencing, telenetworking known as live streaming, 3D printing, augmented virtual reality, and also gamification, interactive whiteboards, cloud technology, artificial intelligence, and of course, mobile technology. The World Wide Web, known as Internet, also enables the sharing of information through various platforms, including massive open online courses, and of course, blended learning and mobile learning through Moodle. Hence, the need for instructors and learners to acquire skills in digital technology to facilitate delivery of courses or training programs for students. In this regard, lecturers can be able to create, change, and assign personalized courses for students, support charts through platforms like Moodle that have capacity to mount all sorts of capabilities like anti-plagiarism software, examination data banks, and also can be integrated with other live streaming platforms like Zoom and other learning management systems such as Blackboard and Google Scholar. These technologies expand and shift learning from teacher-centered to student-centered, where students are in control of their learning with a wider and enjoyable access to knowledge, which provides for students' creativity, group and teamwork, and for more collaborative learning environments. The use of these technologies, however, demand the development of relevant teaching and learning policies to accommodate online teaching frameworks. These technologies can also be stretched to accommodate practical disciplines such as engineering, agriculture, and medicine through the use of artificial intelligence that can open up teaching techniques such as augmented virtual reality, where virtual experiment or even surgery in medicine can be demonstrated and perfected by learners at low cost, with minimal risk to patients. In closing, my remarks, appreciation goes to UNDP for providing such an opportunity for dialogue between strategic players in the Kingdom of Eswatini to look at ways of using innovative technologies to design an inclusive and sustainable educational system that will help produce the required human resource for socio-economic development of the Kingdom of Eswatini. Appreciation also goes to all our partners that include mobile telecommunication companies, ministries, RSTP, and all other key players, including the students who have agreed to be part of this important dialogue as we endeavor to protect the right of the African child, that is access to education. With these few words, may you have a fruitful day, and may God bless you, and may we pray for a breakthrough in vaccine development so that we could be saved from this disease as we celebrate the 75th year of the United Nations. With these words, I thank you.
Good morning to all of you, and thank you very much, Madam Moderator, for your kind words, for having me. Good morning, Vice Chancellor. Always a pleasure to see you. I said last time that every time that I am in your presence, I am at university. It makes me feel younger. So we should spend more time together, definitely. That's the cue against wrinkles or anything else. Thank you very much. More seriously, my speech would be along three main points. One is indeed to clarify the UN at 75. The second one is to emphasize the SDGs, which are actually at the core of not only the discussion of today, but what the UN in Eswatini is doing. And we will speak in particular of SDG 4, quality education, and SDG 9 here, which is on industry, industrialization, and also innovation infrastructure. I think these are the 2 points, and then maybe I will also emphasize as we speak, obviously put all this in the context of COVID-19. What is happening, not so much the figures, but how in keeping this promise in mind, we will actually recover better from the pandemic and we will build a better nation. So I will start, Vice Chancellor of the University of Eswatini, distinguished panelists, ladies and gentlemen. It is with great pleasure that I join you today on behalf of the UN Development System in Eswatini. In total, we have 16 agencies. We have 8 of them in Eswatini and 8 of them in South Africa, but which have programs and activities in Eswatini. So it is with pleasure that I join you on their behalf ahead of this very important engagement to discuss the role of digital technology in advancing the Sustainable Development Goals, in particular SDG 4, on quality education, which is the focus of our discussion today. Coincidentally, the SDG in focus for the month of July, we are still in July, is SDG 9, which calls upon nations, including Eswatini, to build resilient infrastructure, promote inclusive and sustainable industrialization, and focus or foster innovation. Every month, the UN spotlights one of the 17 SDGs, highlighting its purpose, targets, and criticality in advancing Agenda 2030. We partner with the UN with local newspapers to issue every month an op-ed that is actually highlighting that SDG. So this month's focus is SDG 9. This year, the UN is marking its 75th anniversary at a time of great disruption in the world, compounded by an unprecedented global health crisis with severe economic and social impacts. In light of the challenges facing the world today, the Secretary General, Mr. Antonio Guterres, has launched global dialogues to get your views, your concerns, your ideas, and recommendations on how to shape a better future for the world. So the dialogue of today is a series of dialogues in Eswatini, but a series of dialogues around the world. We have here in consultation with a number of partners and here in consultation with UNDP, we have decided to have that dialogue with you today, but a couple of days ago we had dialogues with Business Eswatini, Business Women Eswatini, we had dialogues with persons with disabilities, we will have dialogues with persons with HIV and AIDS, we have dialogue this week with the youth. We try to hear from those groups that at times are not really heard or are not being given an opportunity to voice their concern, to engage with us. And we will report to New York on what your vision for a better future of the world and of Eswatini is. As such, the UN has been encouraging countries to gather voices on the future we want and the UN we need, particularly for marginalized groups, for inclusion in a report to be presented at a World Leaders High-Level event to be held during the 75th session of the General Assembly in September 2020. We believe that the voices of Eswatini will be heard more than before because Eswatini will be sitting in that 75th session of the General Assembly as a vice president. So this gives me also the opportunity once again to congratulate Eswatini for its election as vice president of the UN General Assembly 75th session. I take this opportunity to also congratulate and commend the University of Eswatini for taking the lead in hosting this dialogue and seminar in collaboration with the UNDP Accelerator Lab, which aims at enabling access to appropriate e-learning platforms. This is yet another demonstration that partnership, which is SDG 17, partnerships are key to the achievement of all SDGs. During the challenges that we face, we remain in this decade of action. Decade of action 2020 to 2030. We have 10 years globally to attain all those 17 SDGs. So we are in this decade of action, and with only 10 years remaining to achieve Agenda 2030 of the SDGs, countries are accelerating steps towards ending poverty, fighting inequalities, tackling climate change, and ensuring that no one is left behind. Knowledge and information have brought transformative change in our existence, and they are the key drivers behind the implementation of the SDGs. Agenda 2030 recognizes the need to develop knowledge societies where everyone has opportunities to learn and engage with others, which highlights the need for access to ICT, information communication technology. The reality, unfortunately, is that in many places, people and communities still cannot access neither computers nor internet. While more people can get online today, access to the internet still largely depends on where they live. The digital divide between developed and developing countries shows significant differences in terms of the access to internet. The percentage of people connected in sub-Saharan Africa, for example, is estimated to be 35% only. 35% people who are connected, compared to about 90% in the most developed countries. This is the divide between developed and developing countries. For many, particularly those in developing regions, the spread of smart mobile devices has brought access to internet. While internet has already changed the world, major challenges still lie ahead, and internet history has just begun, as COVID-19 demonstrates. Indeed, digital technology has become a critical tool and an enabler during the COVID-19 pandemic. I trust that you have all realized that since COVID-19, we have never used digital technology as much as we do nowadays. It is the engine behind vaccine research and COVID-19 research. It drives e-commerce and enables hundreds of millions of people to work and to study from home. It is also the instrumental agent through which most people receive life-saving information about the pandemic. Education is another very important online area. However, the ability to have children take classes online is only a viable option for those with access to internet. Central to innovation and access to digital platforms in Eswatini is the need for all Eswatini to have access to affordable internet services. This is critical. The government has taken several steps to ensure that the country is covered with 4G signal coverage and affordable packages, data packages. However, internet costs remain high in many areas of the country. As the COVID-19 pandemic has altered educational system, the UNDP Accelerator Lab is commended for supporting e-learning capacity at the University of Eswatini through the provision of internet data for 7,839 students, as well as the development and the experimentation of digital learning platforms. As schools have gradually started to reopen from this month, solidarity, unity, and collaboration among all stakeholders are required to ensure that students in Eswatini have access to safe and affordable internet, as e-learning may increase throughout and beyond the pandemic. This is not the end. Digital technology could actually rule the manner in which we learn, we study, and we interact and we trade. I would like to conclude my remarks by highlighting that SDG 9 and possibly Agenda 2030 cannot be attained without massive ICT investments that reach out to and benefit local populations, especially in remote and vulnerable communities. Once the acute phase of COVID-19 crisis is over, countries will need investments in infrastructures more than before in order to accelerate economic recovery, create jobs, reduce poverty, and stimulate productive investment. Let's build resilient infrastructure, promote inclusive and sustainable industrialization, and foster innovation to achieve SDG 9. Let's continue to invest in the use of innovative technologies to build and design a more resilient educational system that will help us achieve all SDGs. Finally, I wish you, all of us, very fruitful deliberations and a very lively engagement as you dissect very critical matters. And I really hope that in addition to us in the room, we will also have the contributions of the many others who are on the line. I thank you. Siabonga? It's correct? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. At this point, I just want to request Ms. Nontobeko Mlangeni, who is the head of solutions mapping within the UNDP Accelerator Labs, to come and facilitate the next program and the next activities. Just a few more snippets. Television coverage in the country is at 35% households. And per 1,000 people, about 37 have personal computers. This just gets to show, and radio coverage is actually the largest in the country. So this basically gets to show that we still have a long way to go. If we want to get everyone equally accessing education in whatever means, we have a long way to go. At this point, I will request Ms. Nontobeko to come up front, and she will take us through what the Accelerator Labs are, and then she will take us through the whole discussion. There is Mr. Mgadi here, who at some point I will request him to talk about the UN75 survey, which we would like to request you to actually take. It's a very short survey that we request you to actually take for us, just to talk about what the UN is doing, how you foresee things moving within the next few years, and how you actually expect, or what the challenges have been in terms of the development work, especially as we walk towards 2030, towards the Agenda 2030 and the achievement of the SDG goals. With those remarks, I will request Ms. Nontobeko to take not the podium, because I know she'll be moving around. She cannot stand still, so please forgive her. So she'll move around a lot. So please allow her to take the stage, and she will basically take us through the next part of the session. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kuku. Here's a round of applause. Okay, thank you, Kuku. My name is Nontobeko Mlangeni. As she had said, I'm with the Accelerator Labs program. May I greet you all, ladies and gentlemen, and recognize the presence of the RC, as well as the Vice Chancellor from the University of Eswatini. Kuku has rightly said and made my disclaimer. They always say in fact, they are saying every day that we should be keeping a social distance, but I always do make the disclaimer that unfortunately I cannot stand still naturally, and maybe because sometimes on Sundays I find myself preaching, so you find that I am used to walking within and between podiums. Oh, okay, this is going to be difficult. Okay, seemingly they are requesting me to be still. I'm going to try my best, colleagues, but please forgive me if I move away from the cameras. I've introduced myself already. My name is Nontobeko Mlangeni. I'm a solutions mapper with the Accelerator Labs program. I'm just going to talk briefly as to what the Accelerator Labs are. They're a new approach by UNDP. We're actually an experiment. I won't even say we're a program or a project. We're an experiment that is expected to last 3 years. But if all goes well, we are hoping that it is going to be adapted into the way that UNDP works. The experiment is about reimagining development in the 21st century, building on the experiences of grassroots solutions and grassroots experiences. The idea is that people who are affected by challenges are the ones who normally know the solutions to their challenges. You will note even from this audience that as part of this audience, we have students, because we are dealing with the issue of education. And as a lab, we cannot speak to issues of education without speaking to the people who are going through that education system. So that's the idea. Our approach is different to the normal way that you know UNDP to work. So we're bringing in a new method of working for UNDP. Usually UNDP works upstream with governments, as you will know, with partners at the top. But the approach for the labs is that we should be also working at grassroots, identifying local solutions, and then building on those to solve our development challenges. So we need to reimagine development in the future based on what we know currently and what the experiences are in local communities, because those are the people who have the answers. We are building from that for anything that we are doing. The approach is we use certain protocols for our work, which are undertaken in almost 4 stages, not sequentially always, but generally those 4 stages, whereby we start with sense making for whatever we do, which is what that means is that we are going to be exploring, identifying challenges that are existing within the countries in which we operate. UNDP has Accelerator Labs in 90 countries now. It was 60. 30 have just been added, I think, last month. So we're hoping that's a sign that the labs are doing well, so that we are now present in 90 countries. So when we explore within these countries, the ideas that we're identifying the main challenges that are facing countries. And one of the things that we started with in Eswatini as a lab was to work on the issue of youth unemployment, which was the frontier challenge that was identified. And with youth unemployment, we went into issues of entrepreneurship to work with those. And those of you who have been part of our activities, you'll remember that we started with a few workshops in January, which were aimed at looking at some of the issues that were affecting entrepreneurship in Swaziland. We had targeted to do 4 workshops, one of which was on policy and governance issues. That one happened sometime in January. We were also targeted to do one on mapping solutions for access to finance, which was targeted for February. Unfortunately, just during the week we were supposed to be doing that workshop, there were these lockdowns, so we couldn't continue with the workshops, but we had to continue doing that sense-making and exploring of the challenges that are facing entrepreneurs in the country. So the second step that we then go through is that of solutions mapping, whereby we identify existing and local solutions or co-design them with users. The idea is that we design user-led solutions, if there are none that we find existing within the country, and then take them to the third step of experimentation, whereby we experiment with those local solutions, and that is what we are doing currently with the University of Eswatini, hoping that we'll go to the fourth step of growing those solutions, whereby they are being uptaken by the rest of the country. So I had said that we started to work with entrepreneurship on those, but then some of those activities were disturbed by the lockdowns that were imposed by COVID. So we went on then to work with the informal sector. Currently looking at the situation, one of the things that we identified as the main challenges during the exploration was that the informal sector was the most affected sector in terms of continuing their small businesses. You remember that there were total shutdowns for some of those sectors, including saloons, including our barber shops, including our dopa pasi women, those who sell second-hand clothing. So that meant that they had no longer had an income, yet government had provided these support mechanisms that could not reach them, probably because they're already in the informal sector and had to reach. So we worked on how we could design a more resilient informal sector that would continue to work in spite of those lockdowns. So we're having a number of interventions with them, mostly focused on digital transformation. I'll just skip that for now and then get into our journey with the University of Eswatini. In fact, on our journey on education, which incidentally started with the University of Swaziland early January. By then, we're also still looking at the issues of youth unemployment, and you can't talk to unemployment without talking to education, or you can't talk to reducing unemployment without talking to the issues of education. So one of the partners that were quick to pick up on the activities that we're doing was the Department of Science in the University of Swaziland. So we had quite a number of conversations with them, some of which centered around how we can build a more resilient education system for UNISWA. For us, although it was, the aim was that then that would also infiltrate into the rest of the country. And part of that was to design an e-learning platform that would complement the current existing education system that was available at the institution. The idea at the time was that we're just aiming at improving access to education based on statistics from my friends at the Department of Science. The University of Swaziland currently, I'm speaking to the University of Swaziland and all the other institutions in the country, but currently cannot absorb all of the students that qualify to enter the university. So the idea was that this would increase accessibility and also have the potential to reduce the cost of education in Eswatini. But it was like we had foreseen that COVID was coming, and we needed to be prepared and build a more resilient education system for the country. So our discussions for today are centered around some of those, the inspiration that we're drawing from the work that we are currently doing with the University of Swaziland. COVID obviously has exposed the importance of such digital technologies to facilitate continued learning in the country. We've seen from just, when was the first one? I think end of March, when schools were closed down, the divide that we saw between the haves and the haves not within the country. I'll make an example that we saw students from more affluent schools, obviously more affluent families, being able to continue learning through digital education platforms. Unfortunately, that wasn't the same for our more poverty-stricken students. I stay in one of the mixed income neighborhoods in Fanteni, around Babane. And what you would see during the time when just the first month of lockdowns, instead of students being sitting down and continuing to study while those from more affluent families were continuing with their learning, they were all over the roads. It was like it was school holidays for them. I had an opportunity to speak to quite a few of them to ask if they had even been prepared by their schools just to have at least homework or structured learning that they would be able to continue at home. Most of them were just telling me that no, we're just told to go home. No one told us that we're supposed to continue learning. Obviously, we had a few weeks later, the Ministry of Education with their partners starting those radio lessons that increased access to education and improved, at least for some of our learners who had access to those means of accessing maybe a national radio, TV, or YouTube. But we still do have those who are left behind who do not have access to even the radio to be accessing that education. So our discussions today, I hope, will bring into light how we as a country can help to build a more resilient education system and ensure that we are leaving no one behind. I'm not going to assume that I know all the answers. In fact, I do not even know the answers to this problem that we are currently faced with. But as everyone knows, the purpose of today's meeting is to see how as a country and discuss how as a country we can use innovative technologies to build and design a more resilient education system and to better develop partnerships for innovative e-learning and the needed infrastructure to facilitate that learning. In the room, as far as I know, we have the Ministry of Education, we have our esteemed students for whom we are really here about. We are supposed to have business Eswatini. I'm not sure if they've managed to arrive. I haven't seen them. We have the Ministry of Information, Communication and Technology. I think I heard someone introduce themselves, so I'm assuming they're in the room. We have RSTP. We have, I'm not sure if MTN has arrived as well. Oh, we have MTN. We have an Innovators Association of Eswatini. And we have, I'm thinking we're supposed to have an internet provider. I'm not sure if Jenny is here. Thank you. So I'm hoping this is just going to be a relaxed session, colleagues, not too formal, just to talk around some of the issues that would help build a more resilient education system for the country using digital technologies. But I'm just going to take maybe 20 minutes to request each one of you the list that I've given, starting with the Ministry of Education, just for them to give us maybe 3 to 5 minutes an idea of how they reimagine development in the 21st century, how they reimagine development, a more resilient education system, and from their perspective, how they think we can build partnerships around stronger infrastructure, around a stronger and more resilient education system. We want to build a better system for Eswatini. May I ask, I think we have Babetsela. Babetsela, is he going to use mine? After these 3 minutes, colleagues, each one of you, I'm going to give a chance, and then we'll get into the discussions just of based on what we've said and based on how we see the future of education in Eswatini.
Thank you so much. All protocol observed. What I can say is that the COVID-19 pandemic indeed caught everyone unprepared, including ourselves as the Ministry of Education and Training. So In terms of maybe the question that you have posed, in terms of building a more resilient education system as a country, as the people that too have been mandated to be the custodians of the education of our learners in this nation. What you can say is that I think partnerships are key, because for us as government, we cannot do it alone. And I think having partners like yourselves as UNDP and others from the private sector can really assist us in moving forward. I think you have rightly pointed out that in as far as maybe trying to address the situation of this COVID-19 pandemic, we have made some means as a ministry in terms of having the radio lessons in the national radio station, having the lessons also on the national TV station, and also in the two dailies that we have. But again, I think it was only targeting those learners that are actually going to write the external examinations. That is grade 7, Form 3, and Form 5. Then the rest of the learners, now you ask yourself, really, what is it that we are doing to actually also make sure that they are not just sitting there at home and not doing anything, and time is being lost in terms of, them not getting the education that they should be getting. So I think, in terms of already when this whole pandemic started, the minister already was doing something in terms of having ICTs in education. Our focus as a ministry in terms of ICT in education is twofold. One is focusing on ICT as a subject in its own right, and also using ICTs as a tool for teaching and learning. I think we were very much lagging behind in the former. Because we were still trying to strengthen the offering of ICT as a subject in the school system. In fact, next year, which is 2021, we were introducing ICT for the first time formally in the education system at the primary level. ICT has been offered as an examinable subject at the high school or the senior secondary level for quite some time now. But of course, even then, it is not all the schools that are offering ICT as a subject, just a few. So I think that is the challenge that we are facing. But now I think, like it has already come out maybe from previous speakers, is that now the major focus should be on ICT as an enabler in education across the entire curriculum. I think there is still a lot of work that has to be done in as far as that is concerned, because when this whole thing of COVID-19 started, we were still trying to come together with partners and try to draft a policy for the ministry that is going to provide guidance in terms of how do we use these gadgets, how do we monitor their use, how do we train the teachers out there, because as we know, not all the teachers actually are comfortable with using technology. It's going to be a new mode of teaching and learning. So I think we have a lot of work that is on our hands as a ministry in terms of training our teachers so that they are up to the required standard in terms of them being able to use ICTs now. Because as it is right now, it is still chalk and chalkboard, it is still pen and paper. So now we need to upskill them so that they are able to transition from pen and paper, chalk and chalkboard, to be able to use these gadgets now to deliver their lessons. Maybe I'll just end there for now. I have a colleague of mine And maybe you can just add from what I've said, Mr. Mamba, from the National Curriculum Center.
Mfodeni.
Thank you, Program Director. Maybe it would be to add just a few things on what Ms. Dansela has said. Okay, mine, I think I look at it in terms of three broad points, if I could put it like that. First one being in terms of human capital. Like he has said that teachers are being trained, but I think for the ministry, especially if you're talking about ICT, for a very long time we have not had relevantly qualified teachers to handle the subject, but we currently have a few, because a few of the colleges and universities are now doing that. Though a lot of schools still do not have qualified teachers, but there are those who have a few qualified teachers. I think it's in terms of the unavailability of the relevantly qualified teachers, and again it is in terms of the employment and deployment of teachers, as it were, by the employer, who is the government. And then I think we all have, or we would agree that one of the serious challenges is about the infrastructure. The schools that we have, I think we have, if you're talking about public schools, we have a very few schools that have got the physical gadgets to begin with, let alone the related infrastructure to connect to the internet and everything else. Just the physical structures, the computers and everything. So it makes the innovation a bit difficult even to implement, because the first thing that you need to have is the infrastructure. And then in terms of curriculum development, where I come from, even there, predominantly we currently use pen and paper, like Mr. Tsela has said, and because of the problems that I have already highlighted, it is a bit difficult to adapt the teaching and learning materials to be compliant. For instance, like if you're using pen and paper, it means, for instance, as we are preparing some of the grade 3 materials that are supposed to be in schools in 2021, you find that sometimes you cannot even use simple things like, you cannot refer them to links, because then you think of the student at a school in a remote area somewhere, that if you say you can access this there, really are they going to be in a position to access that? So that means to make it accessible to them, you reduce it to pen and paper. So I think basically the problems that we have for now mainly is the infrastructure and the human capital. Otherwise, I think we are taking baby steps to try and improve on the materials that we have to make them accessible. Because for the schools that are around town, probably they can use the materials, they can access a lot of things, but then there is a lot of inequality that is related with that. Maybe I'll stop there for now.
Okay, thank you, colleagues from the Ministry of Education. I won't get into the discussions now. I'll just put a pause there for any of you who have questions, but they've raised a lot of challenges ranging from infrastructure, human capital, and others that I'm hoping the partners here will be able to dialogue around and think around how do we get around those as a country. May I just give now, I told you I had my 3 esteemed attendants or participants, the students. I'll just start with them to give us their perspective. We invited students from 3 of our country's institutions. Because of space, we couldn't have everyone. So we have UNESCO, we have Scott, and we have Limko Queen. Next to me, Gugu is already. Just give us your perspective from where you sit as a student as to your experiences, obviously, with COVID and how you see or reimagine the future of education in Eswatini.
Thank you.
Would you introduce it?
Okay. I'm not sure. Thank you, Program Director, for the opportunity you have given me to be a part of this dialogue. My name is Siceliwe Dlamini. I am from the University of Eswatini. I am enrolled in the Bachelor of Nursing Science in Babane campus. I am currently doing my second year. So, education and technology. The university has tried to bring about the fourth SDG, which is quality education with all means through online learning after the whole pandemic spiraled out of control. So we experienced the closure of the university around the 17th of March. And as students, we became very anxious. And since we lay dormant for around 2 months without no direction, as the whole issue of online learning was still being discussed and on the table. So, and then we resumed online learning on the 2nd of June. It started to gain momentum. However, with some of our lecturers, we're already doing some blended learning. They were introducing us to the whole online learning, even before the COVID-19 pandemic took most of our education. So we started on the 2nd of June. It gained momentum, and most of our lecturers were trying to just get us into the program of online learning from our respective homes. So we are using a lot of structures and programs to try, and the lecturers are using a lot of structures and programs to try and equip us with as much education as they possibly can, because we cannot continue lying dormant, because we still need our education, we still need to learn. So through different partnerships, we were able to receive 3 gigabytes of data around the 24th of June after online learning had started on the 2nd of June. So we are learning through voiceovers. The lecturers are sending us voiceovers. As some of us, obviously, we learn through hearing, and we want to hear the discussions. We also receive practical videos as well as YouTube tutorials. However, one thing that most of us are finding difficult is because the 3 gigs of data is only it's not an all-round platform, because using the 3 gigs of data, we are not able to try and navigate other sites, go through other links, go through the same YouTube tutorials that the lecturers are sending us via our Moodle, which we are using as a learning platform currently. So we have to use other means to try and balance up the education, to try and stay intact. However, it has been a very difficult ordeal for us students, honestly, because some of us are not very much well versed with the whole technology system. We appreciate pen and paper. We appreciate a lecturer standing in front of us learning. However, this has been a great, if looking at the positive side, it has been a great structure, honestly, because some of us are planning on going further and doing our masters, doing our PhDs, which we are obviously, in some instances, we are going to be learning online. So this has been a great practice, if I may call it. Yes, I think that is all I can say for now.
Thank you so much. We have to start again because of my chance that I've given already ahead of applause. Please introduce yourself.
Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Malcolm Dlamini from the Limpopo University. Enrolled as an IT student, information technology, during my last semester this year. So with this, one would say us as humans, we are a bit naive because long ago, the Spanish flu hit the world very hard, same way as this COVID-19 is hitting us. So how come we didn't recover? How come we didn't expect another pandemic? Is now we can't recover from this COVID thing. A couple of weeks ago, I had a conversation with a friend of mine, and I asked him what his thoughts were about this COVID, and his comment was, and I quote, "I-COVID itekutolungisa." So with this bold statement, after carefully thinking about it, I can't agree with him because now with this pandemic, it is an extra gear in the direction of moving operations online, adapting, using digital means of doing things in this country. So I really don't know how it has affected students in my school because I was doing internship this semester. So to recover from this, I think we as a country, we need more internet providers because SDG number 4 talks about quality education. In the outskirts of the country, there are schools that have poor network coverage, hence no or little internet connections. So having more internet providers, because now we have, I think, a couple of really major Journey Internet, SPTC, like adding to those to provide more and sustainable internet connection to even in the outskirts of the country, not just the urban areas. Okay. Also, I'm introducing the usage of resource centers. Resource centers are facilities that are based in schools that collect and organize information in educational materials. So these materials can be accessed online remotely. So having them based in schools so that students and teachers can remotely access them while continuing the concept of distance learning. Thank you. I think that's all for now.
Thank you so much. May we hear from our last student? Oh.
Good morning,
Okay,
everyone.
Banse.
My name is Barnele Kulwaba from Scott. Okay, thank you. Thank you for the invitation. What I'd say is COVID exposed a great digital divide between the students. It exposed fractures in the educational system. In as much as we thought, I do computer science in Scott. In as much as we thought that we are being educated enough to go to the education to the digital world, we are not ready. When COVID started, schools were closed, and during the lockdown, our lecturers tried by every means to create online classes, of which most of the students could not attend due to poverty. Of which brings me to this point. In as much as we try to go to number 9, we have to fight number 1 first, because you cannot go to number 9 without going through number 1. So I had a friend who lives in the rural areas. We go to the same class. He couldn't attend because of family issues and poverty, if I may say so. So we thank you for doing this, since now you recognize that we are moving we are moving to a technology-based world, of which we are here to discuss about and how we can move forward from that. Yeah. So I'd like to thank you for finally discovering that we do need to increase the amount of education we put towards engineering and IT and the rest of the things that require sciences in Swaziland. Because currently we are moving towards artificial intelligence, of which we are not ready. To be honest, we are not ready for artificial intelligence. Since as a country, I think only half of the population is exposed to IT, if I may say. Of which when we enroll artificial intelligence in the regions, firstly, people will lose jobs, irregardless of whether you are educated, non-educated, whether you work hard or not. Artificial intelligence is here to stay. And luckily, the United Nations spotted that early before it actually happened to a point where going back will be hard, if I may say. So yeah, I thank you for finally again seeing that and helping the students have a better future. And yeah, I may end there. So thank you.
Thank you. 2 minutes. 2 minutes to my last student. UNESA was kind enough to give me an extra.
Thank you very much. I would like to actually observe the protocol, in as much as there is actually no time. I think my colleagues have actually summed up the experience of students. So moving forward, I would actually quote the words of one futurologist who lived back in the year 1970, wrote a book called The Shocking Effect, which he narrated and said that people would be traumatized due to being subjected to too much change in a short space of time. So he also said that the illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn and unlearn and relearn. It is very important to understand that 45 years ago, it would have been relevant to wait for COVID-19 pandemic to end before education proceeds. But today it is actually not relevant. I actually would, looking and observing the way we have been dishing out classes at UNESA online, I actually came up with some criticism, but in an optimistic manner, that the first thing that is necessary when we discuss the issue of online learning, it is the focus on perspective and perceptions. We need to outline the purposes of whatever education system or tool we try to adopt and introduce to our students, so that these students will actually see if these resources, they can outsource these resources. And also, again, this tool that we actually choose to use should be one that has multiple value. It should give the student knowledge and also give them skills. It should be also an adaptable, improved assessment model. This tool should allow the lecturers, because currently what happens is that the student would even use Google to answer the questions. I would suggest that once the student writes this assessment or in the form of tests, the lecturer then calls the student one by one and ask them that in question 2, this is how you answered. Can you make a comment about, before you actually would say that, I think that would be a form of, we will quickly blend the learning. Lastly, the pedagogy should be student-centered. Whatever it is, it should be student-centered. It should move from just instruction to learner, because students in Swaziland really know that everything should come from the teacher, come from the lecturer. But now it should be the students who actually look for the information. So I think the lecturer should just introduce a little bit of the topic and then give the whole lot to the students. So this means that students would have a lot to do. I have one more point. I think it should also be exigent and viable to say that it should be challenging, but also achievable. You cannot just give students a lot of work until students run on a burnout. So that would not work. Thank you.
There we've heard colleagues from our esteemed guests, our students. Can we just give them, please, a round of applause? They've raised some very pertinent issues, which I hope this group of participants will be able to discuss around. Issues of leaving no one behind in terms of even the current methods that are being used that seem to be currently leaving people behind. So we need to discuss how we close that divide. I'm glad that they've already raised the issue of artificial intelligence, which is also changing the future of jobs. We've had many discussions around this and around reskilling our graduates and Swazi children for future jobs with the Department of Science. I'm glad we have Sandile Mota here. I'm just going to give him 5 minutes now to talk around some of the work that they are doing. Artificial intelligence obviously has become a more of a reality. So we need to think around what we do with the young graduates in Eswatini, whose potential jobs can be taken over by artificial intelligence. Sandile Mota has brought about, we've had discussions around many ideas that he has and that the department has for the UNESCO and for the country to ensure that the graduates that come out of these institutions of higher learning within the country and the graduates that come out of, not even just graduates, that the future of Eswatini, because some of his ideas don't even focus on just UNESCO, but around what Swazis can benefit from being reskilled for the next generation of jobs. So I'll just give him 5 minutes to talk about that, but also maybe his perspectives on how we can build a more resilient education system for the country. Thank you.
Thank you, Nontobeko. I'm the principal investigator of the experiment that is being funded by the Accelerator lab. So we are working with a group of students, 4 current students and 1 former student who is currently unemployed. So when we started this project, in fact, the concept did not start this year. It started about 2 years ago. We're seeking a solution to, well, the university had proposed in a strategic plan that blended learning should be, used to solve the inefficiencies in the education systems at the institution. So we came up with an idea to build resources, to start a project that will build capacity, help staff to be able to build resources or develop resources for online teaching, because blended learning is just a mix of face-to-face and online teaching. So what we noted was that staff members who are supposed to deliver the blended learning do not have the skills, particularly in developing the online resources. So as a faculty, where you have departments that specialize in technology, we came up with ideas to build these online resources. So firstly, we approached MTN about 2 years ago in responding to an advert. They put out an advert in the local newspapers under the MTN Educare program. So we had discussions with them, but then noted that their interest at the time was more on high school projects, not tertiary. So we sort of shelved the idea. And then at the beginning of this year, UNDP came to the university to talk about the Accelerator lab programs. Then we submitted our proposal to them, and they responded positively, and we started working. So I must emphasize that when we started learning, the focus was still on online resources to support the university's policy on blended learning. So when we started, we're thinking that we should develop solutions for the online learning. But then there was COVID-19 in the process. Because we're working with students at the time, the thought was that we're going to engage the students within the university. So COVID-19 then led to the closure of the university. Then the students who were participating in the project now had to go home. And at home, they did not have access to the internet. And as you can imagine, you cannot develop an online solution if you do not have access to the internet. So that sort of failed. But then through the assistance of UNDP, we're able to get data for those students so that they can continue to participate in the program. But now, working with the students helped us to refocus, because one of the things that we observed was that you cannot find a solution to the problem without putting the people that are affected by the problem at the center of the solution seeking. So halfway through the project, then it dawned on us that we must kind of divert our focus from the online and look for offline solutions, because online solutions will not assist the general student population because they do not have access to the internet. So just to conclude, then the students then came up with an offline solution. So a highlight of the experiment, just to conclude, would be to say that we have now developed a product that runs offline without using data, but has the same look and feel and functionality of an online tool. So that is where we are at this stage.
Okay, thank you. In the interest of time, can I just, now I'm going to be stingy with my time, I'll just give 3 minutes to RSTP to also talk to us on their perspectives. They've done a lot of work through their programs around these issues, partly through their incubation programs. Can I just give you 3 minutes, to
Thank you. Okay, as the Royal Science and Technology Park, what I can highlight what we have done so far when it comes to the education sector and also utilizing ICT. For us, what's important is the extensive use of technology in education. We have the Advanced School of IT within the Royal Science and Technology Park. And in it, what we have done, we've tried to be as inclusive as we can be in terms of all our students that are there. We give them laptops so that when they go home, they are able to do their work when they're at home. As well as we have an online varsity, which means they access all their books through online. They have ebooks. And what we've done now during the COVID times, we've provided them with data bundles so that even if you are at Hluti, you're not going to be affected as much as if you are in Babane, where maybe you have more access to internet if your parents can afford. So all our students, we've managed to give them that access for them. But what's critical for us, for the education sector, what we want to see going forward is basically ensuring that our infrastructure also is at a level where all our students will have access, because we know sometimes our network is not stable, so our students are unable to even access their books or maybe even lessons for that day with those lecturers. Our lecturers, luckily at RSTP, they all are digital savvy because we are digital focused. So they're all ICT lecturers and they are able, they know all the programs, and we've always used assessments in terms of online as well. So they're able to even do their exams online. There isn't any disruptions per se. There is that discomfort that they don't have the face-to-face learning, but there's the element of no disruptions in terms of them going forward of learning. However, the other elements that we're trying to encourage is through partnerships with Ministry of Education. We normally have a program with them, which is Africa Code Week, where we're teaching coding skills for kids at primary and high school. So we normally do that program, but this year it's been disrupted because we can't go to schools. The schools are closed. We train the teachers as well as we go to the students. We partnered with the Ministry of Education on that one. And with that partnership, we can even go further because we have a national data center with ourselves where there's cloud-based services that we can provide platforms. We have already developed one e-learning platform that we have. Currently, it only has a capacity of 1,000. We would like to pilot it to extend it to other institutions. Maybe we can utilize it for primary schools, for example, or high schools. We can extend that to our partners. We are always trying to liaise as much as possible with Ministry of Education on any of our developments. Is my time over?
Yes.
Will I be able to speak later?
Yes, I'll give you a chance to during the discussions. Thank you so much, RSTP, for those insights. I'm hoping we can leverage on some of these experiences to build this more resilient system. And finally, colleagues, in the interest of time, I would have loved to talk to a few of you. RSTP has already spoken to this, that mobile telephone companies are a key player in improving connectivity for access to e-learning platforms for students. But there are some factors that remain a hindrance, including those of cost and infrastructure, especially for the disadvantaged rural population and rural youth in particular. May I just give MTN 2 minutes to speak to some of these issues and how we can help, and how mobile and other telephone companies can help build a more resilient education system. We know they have a soft heart for education through some of their programs. So 2 minutes, Njebe.
Thank you for the opportunity. Mandla Pondo from MTN Eswatini. We've tried to cover a bit of ground in terms of network coverage. Maybe I can highlight that when it comes to network, we are sitting at 98% for the whole country. Data coverage was sitting at 90%. But on a yearly basis, the company invests a bit of money in improving the network coverage so that ultimately we cover the entire country. For this year, for instance, we set out to establish 9 network sites. One of them is already up and running at Mjoli. We are hoping to finish up the remaining 8. So it's an ongoing process. It's unfortunate that the landscape of the country is such that you would need, it's not a flat landscape. So we need more investment in terms of aerials so that the coverage can be robust. Excuse me. I'll quickly touch on the issue raised by some of the speakers on pricing. We are aware that pricing is one of the challenges when it comes to access to internet. And unfortunately, pricing is a regulated space. You don't just wake up in the morning and flip the switch on data pricing or voice call pricing, because it's a regulated space. But on a yearly basis, there is a process of reviewing our prices. Maybe let me say this, you don't have to quote me anyway. We have another price reduction on the pipeline, because it's a process that happens every year that we review our prices so that ultimately more and more people can have access to network. And then I'd close by saying that as part of our contribution to supporting access to education, we have done a bit of work with UNDP in terms of supporting UNESCO. And we have also done some work with other tertiary institutions like IDM, Limco Queen, UJ, VETS, lots of other institutions where we have Eswatini who are studying in those institutions by whitelisting the URLs or the websites so that we can ensure that they have access to learning material. Not just the websites of these tertiary institutions, but we know that there are other tools that are used by the students. Like when you submit assignments, you have tools like Turnitin. You need to access those sites to be able to upload your assignment, amongst other things. So you find that for one tertiary institution, we've whitelisted 10, 12 URLs so that the students can access all of those platforms. Some of them have specialized applications, apps that they use to conduct teaching and learning. We have whitelisted those as well so that we can support access to education. And we're still open to tertiary institution if there are the URLs or there are platforms, there are applications that students would require to support their learning. We're still open to that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, colleagues. I would have loved for the next session just for us to get into discussions around how we think we can build a more resilient education system as a plenary, but also how we can use partnerships for building this system and use innovative technologies, digital technologies, to build a more resilient education system. I'm hoping my colleague Ngadi will get into that as part of his next session. To give you just a few minutes to make those deliberations. Thank you so much. Yes, a hand of applause as I sit down.
Thank you, Nondo. I think at this time, as we had mentioned, that this was a twofold discussion. There's also the UN75, and I believe this is what will actually bring it home for us to say, after all we have heard and everything else, how do we then move forward? What are the issues that we need to actually now be going into? And I will hand over to Mr. Mgadi, who will take us through this discussion, because we are trying to now wrap up and get your ideas around how we can actually move forward and what are the solutions that we can look into. I'm giving him some 10 minutes to take us through this one so that by 12 o'clock we are able to wrap up. That is what we had planned, and sincere apologies that it is taking longer than we had anticipated. Thank you.
Thank you, Program Director. We have 5 questions in 10 minutes, so that means 2 minutes per question. We are continuing the discussion along the lines that we've been talking. We are innovation, new technology, and education. But just let's be guided on UN75, because that discussion is now going up to the international level. The UN wants to prioritize certain actions in the next maybe 5 to 10 years. So this will be important to get the voices from us in terms of what needs to be prioritized. So this is the engagement. We're engaging with a lot of people to find out what is important that the world needs to look into. So the first question is around COVID. We're being asked to say a few, maybe 3 people can say, one per person. What is the one important thing that we think we should prioritize to recover better? And I think the emphasis is on recovering better. So we will just, by a show of hands, anyone who's ready that has an idea, because as I think Kuku was saying, we are now driving us into the solutions, not just the challenges only. So anyone who's ready, then we can do in 10 minutes. We will be quick.
I'm going to handpick.
That's a good idea.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Mgadi, for the opportunity, and thank you to everyone who's present here. I think mine already has been touched upon by the students and the representatives that have spoken. But maybe the one area I would like to place an emphasis on is an area on exposure. And this is linked to the connectivity aspect of it. Because if you look at developed countries, so for example, I think it's in Estonia, what they did, I think about 10 or 20 years ago, is give everyone access to internet. And what this does is not only does it enable the students or the stakeholders to access information, but it enables them to research and get a picture of what things look like elsewhere. So for example, one of the things we talk about when we speak of development and the goals that we have, for example, as a nation, we would like to attain first world status. But the challenge we have is our first world in our minds may be different. So my first world may be, what Emelo looks like. Your first world may be what Sentin looks like. Someone else's first world is what Dubai looks like. Someone else's first world is what Macau looks like. So we need to get to a point where we understand collectively what this level we want to reach to looks like. And that can be done through exposure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Access,
you.
for everyone.
Yes. Access.
The next priority.
Thank you very much. My name is Xolile Ngumalo. I'm from the Ministry of ICT. Okay, maybe most of the things that I would also would like to touch on has already been touched on. But maybe for me, just to emphasize, I would like to emphasize on change management for everyone, because this change is huge. It's overwhelming, but we need to embrace it. And with the change management, earlier on I had someone from the Ministry of Education saying most of the teachers are not even comfortable using the technology. So now we are coming with the IT solutions that we're talking about. We are talking about artificial intelligence. We need all the teachers to be, to be prepared. We need them to try to see the positive of this change, because yes, with the introduction of, for example, the artificial intelligence, a lot of jobs would be lost, but it doesn't have to be like that. We need to start thinking to say, how can you reskill people? How can we assist our kids going to school on choosing the right career, that is going to be aligned with all these changes. So for me, it's change management so that everyone is ready for the change.
Thank you very much. Change management. And I think we had a lot of anxiety with these changes, so we need to manage it. Thank you very much.
Adaptability as well.
Yeah.
I think that's the other thing that is coming out. Okay, there's a hand.
RSTP, yes.
Thank you. I think what also we should consider is ensuring that our characteristics that we are going to have now in terms of curriculum when it comes to education has to change from just the basic literacy and numeracy. We should also consider the coding language and also ensuring that creatives and innovation are something that is promoted and fostered. We worry too much about artificial intelligence and machine learning, but those are actually informed by humans. So it's us that informs them. Computers have not moved to the level whereby they think for themselves. The algorithms are the ones that are produced by us humans. So which is why the coding skills should also be from elementary school for the students, so that they are now much more creative. They are able to explore more. This is where you can have your augmented reality as well as virtual reality education coming through. So they see things in a different level in terms of even the exposure that was being spoken of. You don't necessarily have to go to another country to be exposed. You can see it virtually and be able to even study things such as maybe, what is this? Maybe seeing a museum that is in another country at your own country. So that's things that we should consider in terms of changing our curriculum to be very much creative and innovative in the way it is.
Thank you very much. I'll move on. I'm going to look for the pessimists and optimists in the room. One or two. Maybe if the opposing views is good. Where do we think we will be in 2045 when the UN turns 100 years? So are we going to be better off? If we're looking at the trends, are we going to be the same or are we going to be worse off? Just that. And then you can say why you think that will be the case.
I'm looking at the SDGs there. It depends on which one you pick. For example, on things like health and wellness, that will definitely be improved because of advances in biotechnology and things like nanotechnologies. We are seeing now vaccines being developed within a year, which has never happened before. But other things like inequalities, at least in the short term, that's going to get worse before it gets better, especially in education. The digital divide is going to widen in the short term. It's difficult to project how long that gap will be bridged. But 2045 is like 25 years away from now. I don't think that is enough time to sort of close the gap completely. So education inequalities will be worse than they are right now.
So we should just be the same, like now. Here's okay.
There's another viewpoint here from a student.
As I mentioned before, I'll be optimistic. I think in as much as COVID-19 is traumatizing, it has actually impacted some better changes, because sometimes a disaster is a conducive environment for innovation. I believe that people will be better off in 2045 than they are today, because COVID-19 has taught people to be responsible. So there is less irresponsibility, there is less traffic jam, there is less errands which are unnecessary that people are doing. And again, if there will be an end to what we call distorted development that is only focusing on economic development without focusing on social development. So we should focus on both social development in order to sustain economic development.
Thank you. What doesn't
So
kill
says
you
the
makes
student.
you strong.
So says the
be around,
student.
he'll be around in
That-
2045.
That should give us a
Okay.
clue.
We had another
okay,
view
so
here.
Wakhulu
Yeah.
Mafundo, I'm trying to balance the scales here. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. Okay, for me, I want to look at it in two ways. That some parts of the world would be better off, and other parts of the world would be worse off. I am saying this probably in line with what the Prof said, that there is that part of the world that has challenges even as we speak. Now, there are apparently, we don't see feasible solutions to bridge, for instance, the technological divide. The West is probably way ahead from the rest of the world, like Africa. So there is nothing that we see that in the next 25 years, it will probably drastically improve Africa to reach a level that it would be sort of equal to the West. We still need to do a lot, of which 25 years, for me, it looks a bit too short.
Yeah. But what do you want to see? Anybody has an idea of the world that they would like to live in 25 years? What is that ideal world? What do you want to see in 25 years?
You can start answering.
The most.
Okay, maybe briefly on number 2, I would like to say a better future depends on your planning today. How do you plan to improve on something? So I want to believe if we can do proper planning today for the future, we can have a better 2045. And then for number 3, what I would like to see, okay, from a person who is more inclined to technology, I would say the way I see it, with all the technological advancements, artificial intelligence, deep learning, and stuff like that, I think I want to see sufficient engineers, sufficient developers that will be able to manage to develop and manage all these solutions that we want to have, and also to have a robust infrastructure, because we can have all the solutions, beautiful solutions, but if we don't have a resilient network infrastructure, then we are going to raise hopes to the society to say, now you can access this, but then the uptime is not up to scratch. So we want to have solutions that will be available 24/7. So this requires a robust infrastructure. Thank you.
Thank you. That's an ideal world. Maybe in Estonia, as Fundo was saying, we will get there. Professor.
Thank you, Program Director. I would like to see an overhaul of our education system. I think that is where Africa has missed it. We have adopted a Western education with solutions from the West which do not work in Africa. We need a system that will be quicker. The Asians did it better. They saw that they cannot reinvent the wheel. So what they decided to do is reverse engineering, where you take a prototype, study it, and adopt it to your local problems so that it can solve your issues. And I also like that we empower the youth. One thing that we have not realized as the elders is that the youth are actually ahead of us in terms of technology. We should be empowering them more so that they can take over the leadership for the future. And I believe that way we'll be able to manage and solve some of the problems we have. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. We are overhauling, and I think the Minister of Education confirmed that from 2021 curriculum will include ICT.
Thank you, Program Director. Maybe just to add on what has already been highlighted by previous speakers. In terms of the overhaul, yes, that is the direction we should be going. In fact, we are looking towards having a fully functional e-learning unit within the Ministry of Education and digitizing the existing curriculum. So maybe 25 years from now, we will be in a position whereby maybe each and every student in the school system will be actually having the necessary gadgets to actually ensure that they can actually be on those platforms that are provided through e-learning, and all the infrastructure that we are saying is not in place right now. We are hoping, I think we are optimistic because, like we already mentioned, that we cannot do it alone as government. We need partners, and I'm happy that some of the partners are in this room today. Thank you.
Yeah, we are building e-learning future with infrastructure. What are likely what are likely to be the challenges for us that will prevent us from getting there, from that beautiful Eswatini that we're already looking at?
Thank you, Program Director. I think mine will speak to perhaps number 4, which is the main obstacles and challenges that your group. So I'm no longer youth by definition, but as someone who was active in sort of youth groups in my youth, I'd like us to focus on, I think Professor rightly pointed it out, empowering the young people. Part of the challenge there is that a lot of them do not have the capacity or the ability to play in the space in which they need to play to become active participants in what we are talking about. So I'll speak from an Innovators Association point of view. So when it was formed, part of the objectives was to get young people active in the innovation space and all of that. But our experience quickly became a very unfortunate one, in that the people who were initially participating were participating because they had the hope that this was a platform through which they can get finance to start their businesses for their own purpose. So in the end, you found a few individuals now left with an entity that's not really meeting its mandate because of the way it was formed. You form an association because there's a common interest and you see value in coming together. So now this is a notion which goes through even, in terms of youth entrepreneurship. Part of the challenge is if the ministry or any of the stakeholders here want to engage with the youth on issues of innovation or entrepreneurship, where do you start? So normally you just think of individuals who run businesses and you call them to the table. But unless they are a formal entity, it then becomes difficult to get them to participate. So we need to do something around that space to help people understand that if you have these formal groups and formations that are registered and we know what their mandate is, it is then easier to help them participate in the space. So that's an area we need to improve on.
Thank you. We are disintegrated and we should try to formalize. Thank you.
Thank you. As a service provider, in terms of the challenges and looking at where everybody wants to be in 2045, I think for me, I'd say it's a challenge to us service providers. Maybe to actually add on Mfundo's point that having these associations, us not looking at ourselves as competitors in the ICT space, in the ISP space. If we can collaborate and get these infrastructures, work together, share our technologies together. Our service is good for wireless, it's good for the rural areas where we are talking about poverty and all that, looking at the price issue in terms of looking where through the Communication Commission, how we can get better price model to actually make
all these initiatives work. Yeah.
Thank you. Based on your knowledge of what...
There are a lot of challenges, Mr. Mgadi.
They're still coming.
Even the students want to also highlight some challenges, but I think that should be the last one. Okay.
Yeah, mine will be brief. In terms of the one major obstacle, particularly here in Africa, we have very weak, government systems that do not prioritize social justice in terms of equitable distribution of opportunities in society. So if that can be strengthened, and the governments are supposed to facilitate all those, developments listed there, if they are weak, there will be no progress. So those systems need to be strengthened.
From the perspective of the student? Okay.
Mine was like congruent to his, but I had crafted mine by saying it is actually poor leadership or lack of leadership. That's a very big challenge in Africa, because the thing is that there are a lot of funds that come into Africa, and literally you really ask yourself, what are they being used for? So there's a lot of corruption and everything. So it's poor leadership.
How can we help? How can we help you as the UN deal with or manage in these challenges that you have mentioned? Yes. So this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. The resident coordinator is here. We are here. Tell us, what do you want us? How do you want us to help the situation?
Thank you. I think how you can help as UN is having international agreements that we can be party to, specifically that are going to address the socio-economic issues. Particularly when we're looking at education, we touched on having the policy of not leaving anyone behind. And also the element of each child maybe have a laptop or a tablet so that they can access their schoolwork even when they're at home. Policies such as recognizing internet, that it's not a luxury, it's a universal right. Make it part of our basic rights, something that UN now has to move away from the old way of thinking and be with us as the new challenges are coming up. We know what we're facing being in an African country. So the solutions don't necessarily have to be in maybe one bucket, but also consider in countries where there isn't any maybe strong governance areas, then maybe in those areas what we need is those international agreements which will force us to implement them by being party to those agreements and ratifying them.
Thank you. Thank you. That's a valid point. I think a lot of what the UN is doing is actually to assist in that regard. But we will allow the resident coordinator to wrap up after this session. But I'm sure there's more that you want us to do as the UN to help manage the challenges.
Thank you again. I actually would be talking again and again.
Represent the students.
Actually, I think to actually mitigate these challenges, we should actually link community-based interventions with the globalization agenda. We cannot leave the grassroots and try to change a system from the top. So we should go back to the grassroots and link the agenda, which is from globalization, which is Agenda 2030, with communities, their involvement, their knowledge of this agenda, and the project that they are doing to actually accomplish this agenda.
Which university? He's really representing.
That is
I can't see any more hands in terms of what we can do, but I will allow Gugu to continue with the program. This is the last question, so I think now we should try to wrap up. Thank you very much for your participation. It's been good. I think we can, of course, see that we need more time, but I think what we've already gained is a lot. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mgadi. I think from us, all we can say is that this is a start. Obviously, we need more time. Obviously, we need more dialogues like this one. There is so much to be said. There's so very little time, and we know that the COVID has almost made it impossible for us to have longer sessions where we can actually really go deeper into these issues. But this is a start, and I think we have received quite a number of issues, and I think the last point by our dear student there in terms of the grassroots, and I think that is Nontobego, I'm sure, was probably smiling, because that is why the Accelerator labs have also been created, to say we need to go back to the grassroots, because they have the solutions. They know what solutions will actually get them out of this whole processes. So with those remarks, I would like to hand over to the resident coordinator to make her closing remarks. And I think what we can say is that we are collecting all your voices, we are collecting all your ideas, and it will help us as well to also formulate the kinds of programs that we need to formulate to continue to assist you. And I think I want to emphasize on the issue of partnerships. Partnerships are key, and I think it was one of the service providers there who said one of the issues is the collaboration and partnerships, and I think it is a goal of the SDGs, and I think we really need to start looking at how we can harness partnerships to ensure that we achieve the goals. 2030 is not far off, 10 years from now. 2045, 25 years from now, we need to see a difference. With those remarks, I'd like to hand over to the resident coordinator to make her closing remarks, and then we shall close and continue. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Gugu, and very many thanks to all of you for your comments. Very frankly, I was not supposed to be here until the end of the session. I was supposed to be here only to open and then to run to another obligation, but it was extremely informative. I learned a lot from you. I think that with people of your background, I should not have expected less than what I heard today, but there are a few points that I would like to make. And I took note of one of you saying, in order to go to SDG 9, we need to start with SDG number 1. And while I thought that it was extremely valid, I would like to remind all of you that actually all the 17 SDGs are interlinked. You cannot achieve one without having achieved the other one, or at least attain a number of targets under that SDG. So that point is valid. Another one is one of the students who said so many times, finally, and finally. And in particular, I think that he implied that with COVID-19, we came to a number of realizations, and including the realization that SDG 9 and the technologies are critical for almost the survival of the mankind and humanity. And I would like to say that because the SDGs, which replaced the MDGs, were issues in 2015, and with that SDG 9, obviously a number of persons, including the world leaders, because they are the ones who signed the Agenda 2030, had already envisaged, contemplated that SDG 9 and the others were critical in order to have a peaceful, prosperous, healthy world, and green as well. We didn't speak much about climate change and environment here. And even through those technologies, we achieved that green world, and we didn't speak much about that. We didn't speak much, we spoke a lot about education, but we didn't speak much about persons with disabilities, the ones who are blind. How have they been continuing their education, blind, deaf, and how have they been accounted for in those e-learning programs? Did we think about them? Those who are physically challenged. I ask specifically here that the microphone be given to one of the only 2 females here present, because gender matters. And I didn't hear that here. And I just mentioned that because I said that we have been having those dialogues. Gender matters, and I'm calling on those who are actually advancing SDG 9 to ensure that girls and women are a part of this, that they are not left behind when SDG 9 will be attained here in Eswatini. Otherwise, we will have failed with anything that we want to do with the education, with the health, what we want to do with the education and the rest. And I will come and visit you and would like to see your figures on gender. I will come. I hope that it would be a 50-50. Someone mentioned here, another student, and Mr. Vice Chancellor, you said here that we need to empower people, we need to empower the youth. And I paid attention to the youth here. Someone said poor, weak leadership. And I want to tell him that this is, I don't say that it's a valid point, I pass no judgment. That's not my role. But I want to say that we heard the same elsewhere in another group. And this is precisely why we have those dialogues. Because we stopped here, we said the title is The Future You Want, the UN We Need. However, the totality, and in particular the theme of the next General Assembly, it's all about multilateralism. And with multilateralism comes the issue of leadership. The world leaders are being called by their people to change the past 75, the trends, what is good, and how we can build a better world. So the issues of leadership will definitely be looked into, but I believe that when you spoke of leadership, you wanted also to speak about governance. You spoke about how the resources are being used. It's really the issue of the governance. It was not mentioned here, but it is there. I would like to conclude. And here I heard also the comment that was made about international agreements to which people should be a part of in order to possibly unlock all the challenges that are there. I would like to mention that in Eswatini, the UN, and you will see it most likely in the newspapers if you haven't followed closely, that we are signing with the government of Eswatini a 5-year agreement. It is called Cooperation Framework. And we have been, since 2019, really consulting with the people so that indeed we will bring Agenda 2030 to the communities. Obviously, we sign with the government, but this agreement is for the people of Eswatini. And we want to hear from the people of Eswatini what they would like the UN and the government and other partners to do in this country in the next 5 years. We know they are the UNDPs, there is the strategic roadmap, but what is it that the rural women would like to see? What is it that people with HIV and AIDS would like us to pay greater attention to? Is it social protection? Is it the economic growth of the country? What is it? And we are almost at the end of the signing of this agreement. We hope that we will sign in September, and we are continuing to listen to you. Obviously, we will not be able to achieve it all. We will use our comparative advantage, UN, and we will also work closely with others. I would like to close with this point. Someone said that it should be a human rights universal right to have a laptop. It should be made mandatory. I agree with you, absolutely. And this is where now the role of the UN, it's also to facilitate possibly discussions, negotiation between the big corporations. How do we call them? It's not only the Facebook, the others, the Bill Gates, but the others, oh, help me. Microsoft, as an example. And to say that this is the compact that we want you, big corporation, to sign with every country and to ensure that indeed children have access to the tablet or the laptop, but in addition to that, obviously, to the network and the Wi-Fi and whatever, in order to use them. This is, I think, a brilliant recommendation. And I said, in addition to all the others that were made, we will continue to hear each and every of you. There is one session, there are two, that will be very important. LGBTQI, to speak with those who are left behind. You are educated people, you know what LGBTQI stand for. You do. Who doesn't? We will have also the elderly left behind. What do they have to say about a future in which obviously they will, or to which they may not contribute, they will not be here to see what will happen in the next 25 years. So the elderly, it will be interesting to hear from them. Which are the other groups? Yeah. Youth, men, and the migrants. These are the people who we will have in our session. Please join us online, if and as necessary. Join us in the rooms if you want to be there. This is really how the future is being shaped, and you are a part of that future. I will stop here. I thank you for your participation, and I thank you for the invitation. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. What have I done? Thank you very much, Madam RC. With those remarks, I don't think it is for me to actually continue and negate what she has said by over-speaking. So I would like to thank you all for taking this time to join us. And like we have said, this is just the first of many sessions that we will be requesting you to, because like Mage Ndongose has mentioned, we have our 5-year cooperation, and that means we need to start programs that will ensure that we fulfill those obligations that we have actually signed up to. And that is where you come in, because you are the people on the ground, you are the stakeholders, and you are the people that we need to get the ideas from and the solutions from in terms of what it is that we need to focus on. So thank you very much for your time. If you did not already take a pack of snacks, please feel free to do that. And we shall be contacting you and giving you the links to this whole session. We have your emails. Unfortunately, we did not have the registration form because we are trying to go paperless. I hope you understand that. But we have all your emails, and that is how we actually invited all of you here. So we shall be sending you the links so that you can sit and watch. And if you have any other comments, please feel free to continue to contact us so that we are able to build a better future for our country. Thank you very much. God bless you. Thank you.